Okay, hello everyone, and good afternoon. Good afternoon to all of our members here in person and via live stream, our guests and friends of Boston University and our entire community. We welcome you. My name is Amanda Bailey. I'm the Vice President for Human Resources here at the university, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today. It is the fourth event of the Innovation to Action Workplace Culture Series. Today's title is dedicated to advancing a culture of care, leading from the front lines. A little bit about this event. We know that the nature of work, the profile of the new worker, the future worker, and the workplace is ever evolving rapidly as we discuss future of work tenets. This speaker series and all of its events have been established to offer insights that raise awareness, to inform new ways of thinking about the evolving culture at work to meet the accelerated changes impacting the nature of work, the new worker, and the workplace. Today's event is being brought to you by the Office of Human Resources in collaboration and sponsorship with the Office of the Senior Diversity Officer. Thank you. A few housekeeping items for our guests in person. Please take a moment, if you haven't yet, to silence your devices. For our virtual guests, please take a moment to mute your audio. And before I kick off introducing our keynote speaker today, I'd like to thank our esteemed panel of guests who are going to be joining us, our panel moderator and our keynote speaker in particular, for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. I'd also like to thank our BU colleagues across many departments for their dedication to making today's event happen. And among them are our colleagues from events and conferences, productions, marketing and communications, dining services, community safety and preparedness, and with special thanks to our colleagues in the Office of the Senior Diversity Officer and in BU Human Resources. Now let's turn to kicking off our event. I'm so pleased to introduce our keynote speaker today, Dr. Allison M. Vaillancourt. Dr. Vaillancourt is a Vice President and Senior Consultant of Organizational Effectiveness at Segal Consulting. Segal Consulting is a national consulting firm focused on human resources and organizational strategy. As a member of Segal's OE practice, Allison consults with organizations in various industries on future planning, organizational culture and redesign, leadership effectiveness, and creating inclusive and high-performing workplaces. Allison is also an executive coach. I don't know where she finds the time, but she does. Allison's expertise is informed by more than 30 years of faculty and leadership experience in institutions of higher education across the U.S. Prior to joining Segal Consulting in 2020, Allison most recently served at the University of Arizona as the Vice President for Business Affairs and Human Resources and was an award-winning faculty member in the university's School of Government and Public Policy. Allison frequently writes about workplace issues for the Chronicle of Higher Education and is the author, most recently, of the Organizational Politics Playbook, 50 Strategies to Navigate Power Dynamics at Work. Allison earned a PhD in Public Policy and Administration from the University of Colorado at Denver, and also received a master's degree in Public Administration and bachelor's degree in Political Science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Allison Vaillancourt.
So when Amanda first asked me to join you today, I said, well, what's the topic? And she said, advancing a culture of care. And I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? And she said, just that thing you talk about. And I said, well, you know, I could talk about all sorts of things. And so what we did was we settled on something, it's small, but it's powerful. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it before. It's interesting. You all have access to it. Not everybody knows they have access to it, which is interesting to me, because it's like a multi-purpose tool. So, and it's been research tested, and it makes employees feel valued and supported and cared for. It actually also increases organizational performance. It reduces lawsuits, of all things. It increases the leadership pipeline, the diversity of the leadership pipeline. It improves safety. And it's called constructive feedback. Have you heard of it? And even though you've heard of it, The question is, are you using it? And I'm sure all of you are because you are experts and you are interested in this, but not everybody is. And the question is, why is that? When you think about advancing a culture of care, there's so many things that you could do. And this one little thing, constructive feedback, is easy and it's cheap and it's fast. And how much time does it take to have a meaningful impact in your organization? You could probably get away with 5 minutes per team member per week. So if you've got 5 people, that's half an hour. If you've got 10, it's under an hour. To have all the results that we talked about earlier. That's pretty profound. So when we think about feedback, we sometimes think about feedback as a negative feedback. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about feedback that helps people know what they're supposed to be doing. Okay? And sometimes that's do more of that, that's good. And sometimes it's, hey, try it this way. Right? And what's interesting to me is, am I echoing? It feels like I'm echoing. No? I'm good. Okay. What's interesting to me is that so many people get paralyzed when it comes to giving feedback. And the question is, again, why, right? And so if you think about it, if you are coaching a little league t-ball team, well, if there's such a thing, and a kid was holding the bat up like this, you would not wait until the end of the season to say, that was not a good posture for you. You would swoop in right away and say, hey, no, bring it down, right? But we don't always do that at work. So, interesting. So what do we know about feedback? So given how powerful feedback is, what do we know about it? Well, we know that not many people get it. And Pew Research Center found that 34% of employees said they get regular feedback that's useful to them. 27%, so more than 1 of 4, said that they rarely or never get feedback at all. That's a big number, right? We also know that women of all races and Black and Hispanic employees get very little feedback as compared to white men, right? And faculty rarely get feedback on anything other than their scholarship. You know, they're teaching, their research and service. And so we wonder why they get mad sometimes when they don't get opportunities for collaboration or promotion or tenure. And it's because it's a style thing that nobody had the courage to tell them, right? Or it wasn't a practice to do it. So when it comes to giving feedback, one question I want to ask you today is, when you give feedback, is it caring feedback or is it cruel feedback? Now you might be thinking I'm asking a style question. Like, is it really harsh feedback or is it gentle? And I'm not asking that question. Don't ever be harsh. Don't ever be harsh. But I'm really talking about a content question here. And that is, are you telling people what they need to know? Or are you holding back because it just makes you uncomfortable? Or you're worried about making them uncomfortable? And I'm sure many of you are familiar with Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor. And in it, she talks about different kinds of feedback. And I'll talk about 2. One is what she calls radical candor, which inspired the book. And apparently, well, I'll tell you what it is. So radical candor, in case it's not familiar to you, it's this idea that I care about you so much, I'm going to tell you what you need to know. Right? Even if it's hard, I'm going to do it because you need it and I want you to be better. She was going to call it compassionate candor, apparently, but it didn't seem edgy enough, and she didn't think she would sell enough books. So she called it radical candor. So anyway, just a little side tip there. The other piece of feedback that she talks about also comes from a place of care. And that is, I care about you so much, I don't want to hurt your feelings. So I'm just not going to say anything. And if you've read her book, you may remember the story of Bob. Bob was a new member of her team. Everybody loved Bob. Bob was fun. Bob was nice. Bob was fun to be around, and Bob was not cutting it at work. But nobody said anything because he was really nice, and they really liked him. But then over time, it just did not get any better. And so his coworkers were having to cover for him. and they were getting increasingly resentful. And they were getting increasingly resentful at Kim Scott, the author of the book, because she wasn't doing anything about Bob. And it let it go on for a long time, apparently, according to her story. And one day she said to herself, if I don't do something, everybody else is going to quit, so I'd better talk to Bob. So she takes him to a coffee shop to fire him. Now, I wouldn't take someone to a coffee shop to fire them. I'd go some other place. But apparently she tells a story about telling Bob that we just really like you so much, but it's just not working out, and so we have to, say goodbye. And she describes him, just his face falls, and he just pushes away from the table, and he says, why didn't anybody tell me? I thought you cared about me. And that was really, for her, this period of her life that was a catalyst, I think, for thinking about feedback in a very different way. Now, I don't know what Bob did wrong. She did not disclose this. But I think we can all agree that some kinds of feedback are easier to deliver than others, right? Things like work starts at 9, not 9:47, right? That's not easy, but it's not that hard. Or the Excel spreadsheet formula you used is off, so let's try something different, right? These kinds of things are sort of objective, and it's not that hard. What is harder is to tell people that your propensity for drama is kind of exhausting, or you interrupt people in meetings, or you're so reserved in meetings people wonder why you're there, right? That's not easy feedback to give. And yet, it's often these kinds of style issues that hold us back. Most people can manage the technical aspects of their role, and it's the style things that do them in. So I want to tell you a couple of stories, personal stories, which I've actually never told in public before, so I hope they go well, about ruinous empathy, my experience with ruinous empathy. So story one, I'm not long out of college. I've got my first big job. I'm working for a national nonprofit. I have a fancy title and a very unfancy salary, not making very much money. And it was a hard job. I'm up with farmers at Denny's, eating breakfast with them at 5 or 6 in the morning. I am meeting with bank vice presidents for lunch. I'm driving all over nowhere, Wisconsin, to go to these community board meetings. I mean, it was hard, and I was exhausted. But I was crushing my job. I was doing really well. I was hitting all my targets. I was raising all the money. I mean, everything was lined up, and it was good. And then one of my senior colleagues announced that he was leaving. And I knew that my time had come, because I had crushed this job, and that job was open, and this place had a promote from within culture, and so I knew this was going to be my job, and I was very excited. So I waited for my boss to come and talk to me about it, but she did not, which I thought, that's curious. And then I thought, I will be proactive. So I said, I'd love to talk to you about the job, and she said, we should talk about that job. We should. Let's meet for breakfast. She did not fire me, but so we met for breakfast, and it was such a profound experience for me that I still remember that she was eating a spinach omelet. I still remember, because she had a little bit of spinach in her teeth, and I did not tell her about it for reasons that will become apparent very shortly. And so we're eating, and I said, what will it take? Do I have to go through a formal process? And she said, Allison, you are a star. You have got such promise. You really do. But in order to be a district director, you have to look like a district director, and you don't. And I remember at that point, I was digging my fingers into my hand saying, do not cry, do not cry, do not cry. Right? And I said, what does that mean? And she said, well, I don't want to hurt your feelings. But most days, it looks like you're going to a cocktail party rather than going to work. And your hair, it's just wild. And those earrings you wear and the heels, it's not a good look for you. And several board members have actually commented on it. So let's just turn that around, and then the next time there's an opening, then you can probably have it. And I was stunned because, and I said to her, I said, I've been here for more than a year and you never said anything. And she said, well, as I said, I didn't want to hurt your feelings. But in all honesty, you should have figured it out. And we can debate all day whether it's fair that there are dress codes or unwritten rules. I mean, we won't even debate that. The question is, if someone had told me, I could have chosen a path forward. I could have said, forget this, I'm out of here. I could have tried to go shopping, right? I could have tried to change the system, which wasn't going to happen. I knew that for sure. But she denied me that choice by not just being straight with me. Fast forward 20 years. I'm in a university setting. Again, I think I've been doing good work. I get the president's support and the provost's support and sort of the CFO's support to be named a vice president. And I was so excited. And there was just one little hurdle, and that was a regental board meeting, because the regents had to approve vice presidential appointments. And I wasn't really worried about it because I'd worked with the regents for several years, and they knew, I thought they knew, I'm data-oriented, I'm strategic, I'm not afraid of them. When things aren't looking good, I speak up. And so the day of the board meeting comes, and I was out of town actually because I was giving a talk, and my president said, hey, I'll just call you, probably around 11. So 11 comes, there's no phone call. At 12, there's no phone call. At 1, 2, 3, 4:30, he calls. And he says, it didn't happen today, but I'm going to try again tomorrow. I said, what happened? And he said, really, I have to go to the reception right now. Really don't have much time to talk. Don't worry. I'm sure it will work out. I'll talk to you later. And he hangs up. So that was a long night in Portland, I'll tell you that. So next day, he finally calls and he said, well, congratulations. We got it done. And I asked, what happened? And he said, really, we're wrapping up. I got to get back in there. Well, let's talk next week. I can tell you, but don't worry about it. Congratulations. I'm so excited to have you on my cabinet. Well, next week came, and he was out of town, so he asked the provost to talk to me. And the provost said, oh, Allison. And he was kind of a character, this guy. God, geez, it's just not fair, and I hate that I have to talk to you about this, because you're strong, and my wife's strong, and the president's wife is strong, and you remind us of her. I said, what happened? He said, well, I think it would be fair to say the regents really just don't like you. I said, and why? And he said, they think you talk too much and you're opinionated. And they're worried that if you get promoted to a VP, you will talk even more. And I said, I really only offer my opinions when they ask for them. And he said, so here's a little inside baseball for you, Allison. When they ask for your opinion, they don't really want it. But we like you just the way you are, and we need people like you around here, so don't ever change. We've got your back. And I said, I cannot be myself if I am going to survive in this world. I'm going to have to change. And so I did, and that was the choice that I made. Now, did it feel very good? No, not really, but it was a choice that I made. So I think it's interesting to think about what holds people back from telling us what we need to know. And there's so many reasons, right? We're personally uncomfortable. We don't want the other person to be uncomfortable. We don't have a script for what to say. We're not sure that what we think is a problem is really a problem. We're afraid of sabotage, all sorts of options. But there's a new one that's really been on my mind lately, and that is failing to provide feedback because we have a commitment to social justice. Now you might think that seems strange, but as I started thinking about it, I really started to believe that it's not the only reason we're not giving feedback, but it's a growing reason that we're not giving feedback. And that is because we don't believe in the rules. We don't think they're fair. We think the game is rigged. And to have to tell someone that they have to be different in order to succeed just feels awful. So we don't say anything at all. And I asked you earlier, is your feedback caring or is it cruel? And not saying anything at all is really cruel because you are taking the choice away from the other person, right? There's this concept of loyalty, voice, and exit that comes from economics. You probably have heard of it before. But the idea is that if you are a customer at a business, for example, and you don't like the service or the product of the business, you've got three choices. You can be loyal and just go back. So let's say you have a bad meal at a restaurant, you're loyal, I'm gonna go back. I can use my voice, which is I'm gonna talk to the manager, or exit, I'm never coming to this restaurant again. Well, employees have the same choice every day. They can be loyal and try to stick with the rules and play in the game. They can use their voice in order to change the system, or they can leave. But again, when we don't tell them what's going on, they really have very few choices, okay? So what's the action step here? So there are many action steps. I mean, there's all sorts of options for increasing a culture of feedback, and everything from modeling it yourself so that people know that you're asking for feedback, then they should ask for feedback. Having very quick 5-minute check-ins. Hey, what's happening? Hey, I noticed this thing. Why don't you try it this way, right? Doing after-action reviews after you do a big project so you all learn together what's happening. I mean, we could talk all day about what you can do to create a culture of feedback, but you have to create a culture of feedback. Because if you don't, and only some people are having the culture of feedback, then the game doesn't really work. Not a game, the system doesn't really work, right? So you may be asking yourself now, what can I do tomorrow or this afternoon after this? And I would just invite you to do one thing, and that is to go back to your team and talk about feedback and to ask, what kind of feedback do I give you that's useful? What kind of feedback is not useful? What kind of feedback would you prefer to get more? And then could I ask for you to commit to giving me feedback so that we can learn together? And that is one strategy, not very complicated, to advance your culture of care. So, thank you. So I want to turn now to the panelists, and Mumtaz Badshah-Brown, the Assistant Vice President for Talent Development, will be moderating the panel.
Allison, thank you so much. We really appreciate the wisdom, and in a lot of the work we do, we focus so much on feedback because as simple as it is something that is challenging and requires practice. So really, I love how you set this stage for us to have a deeper conversation. And with that, I'd love to introduce our panelists. So I have here Angelique Grant. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Great talk. Thank you for that. Love the vulnerability and personalization of what you shared. I think we can all connect to that. I'm Angelique Grant. I'm senior consultant and principal with the Inclusion Firm. We are a consulting practice that works in North America with nonprofits, and we integrate DE&I frameworks, research strategies to create organizational effectiveness, inclusive cultures, and more. So good to be here with you all.
I'm Jim Johnsen, a vice president with Greenwood Asher. We're a higher education executive search and consulting company. I'm also an affiliate faculty at the University of California at Berkeley. and just finishing up a book that is now available on Amazon for pre-order on the very exciting subject of public university systems and how to use their scale. And Allison is a contributor to the book. And I'm very, very pleased to be here for this conversation today. Thank you. Oh, and I was a university president, so I'm still recovering from that.
I'm Connie Hadley. I want to also thank Allison for her talk. So much vulnerability, and that really helps you understand, if you're the person giving the feedback, the responsibility that you have to have that caring honesty embedded in it. So thank you for sharing those stories. They did work. I know you said you hadn't told them before. So I'm Connie Hadley. I am a faculty member at the Boston University Question School of Business. I'm also co-director of the Human Resources Policy Institute with my friend Charlie Tharp, who is in the audience as well right here. And I also have my own research institute, the Institute for Life at Work. And all of my research is focused on making the work lives of employees better. And that means searching out for pain points, whether it's not getting feedback or not having psychological safety or feeling burned out. And I'm always trying to look for those remedies that'll make it a more enjoyable and more productive work experience.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to dig right in and really unpack this simple idea of feedback, which requires tons of vulnerability and is much more complex than we might realize. So I'm going to start with this somewhat big question of, in your experiences and all of the experiences and the work that you've done, with systems and leadership and organizational change, what are some of the biggest challenges you see that are facing our managers today?
Yep. Want me to go first? So I would say psychological safety. Starting first and foremost, I had mentioned we work with clients in the nonprofit space, government agencies, CDC, et cetera, et cetera. That rises to the top for us. When you think about you had a survey and an assessment that happened in 2021 at BU. It actually assessed organizationally wide sort of the workplace culture and organizational effectiveness. 75% of your employees responded, and there was a specific significant variability between Black and African Americans and the LGBTQ plus individuals in terms of employees. There were some wonderful things. Let's say that it's online. I want to make sure workplace and flexibility was there. Wonderful, wonderful things. Just because I'm going to unpack one of the things that were not so favorable. And it was the one specific question that focused on, I can freely express my views without fear of negative consequences. That one question actually had 41% unfavorable to neutral as it relates to DE&I in the workplace environment. And it was important because we are seeing with lots of institutions and every sector in the nonprofit space, psychological safety is one of those key things that is critically important. And when we talk about psychological safety, it's whether I can be safe asking questions or learning ideas, giving feedback, and so forth, right? And measuring that psychological safety from the standpoint of 4 variations, whether it's inclusion safety, learner safety, contributor safety, challenger safety. So as managers and supervisors, how are you looking at those safety pieces as it relates to your teams? I think the easiest one in terms of inclusion safety, can I be included? Can I show up as I am, right? Allison talked about dress code and attire and being who she is as an individual. The second one in terms of learning, can I make mistakes? Can I ask for feedback, right? Challenger, can I integrate DE&I and other things into the work that we do as practitioners in the nonprofit field, working with students and external constituents? And can I challenge the status quo as a result? The biggest piece in my seat, in my perspective, working with lots of higher education institutions nationally, is one of the things that we should kind of wrap our minds around, if you may, wrap our work around. And I say this because I'm also working with BU's Development and Alumni Relations team. And one of the things that they have incorporated and integrated is this activity and action of brain writing versus brainstorming, right? We get into the room and we all want to brainstorm, but if you don't have psychological safety with whichever of the 4 categories that I defined, because they are literally measurable, right? Then what do? So they've been great at integrating prior to a meeting, allowing folks to anonymously write down their thoughts and their ideas prior, because it helps introverts be able to participate, knowing that there's this psychological safety parameter in the room. It helps them to provide sort of this idea sharing, and it reduces that level of risk as a result.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why I have my notes. Can't remember it all, I'm just saying.
My response is not going to be substantive in the sense of identifying a specific issue, but I'm going to riff off of a little bit of what Allison talked about, and I'm going to take off from the caring metaphor. I'm going to use a medical metaphor. I'm not a medical doctor, but I think it helps here. And I think the biggest single issue from my standpoint is the failure to correctly diagnose the problem. And so if we don't diagnose the problem in medicine very carefully or accurately, we don't have an effective treatment. And so I would suggest that there's a few tools that are available, no matter what the problem is, to evaluate and diagnose. And I'm going to talk about just 3 types. They're sort of similar, but 3 different ways of diagnosing problems. One would be whether it's a technical problem or an adaptive problem. So over the river, over at the Kennedy School is a guy named Ron Heifetz, and he talks a lot about technical problems and adaptive problems. Technical can be very complex. We're going to go to the moon. Very technical issue, but you can solve that. Get a spreadsheet, get a bunch of really, really smart engineers, run the numbers, create the rocket, go do that. But deciding whether to centralize an organization or decentralize an organization, that's an adaptive problem, right? How does an organization decide in a changing context, a rapidly changing dynamic world, or even in the face of a crisis, how does it decide what it's going to get rid of in its history, what it's going to preserve in its history and in its culture in order to adapt to a new and changing world? That's not a spreadsheet problem. That's an adaptive problem. Another example comes also from across the river, Fisher and Urey, Getting to Yes, integrative negotiation. Collaboration is hard. It's easy to compete in a negotiation, right? Competitive negotiation, very straightforward, but you don't have to work with other people. Just do it. It's easy to ignore. I mean, Allison talked about how easy that is to do, how damaging it is, but how easy it is to do, right? But it's difficult to collaborate, which is, and the frame there, the way to diagnose that is ask 2 questions. One, is the relationship really important? And if yes, okay, that guides you in one direction. And then, is the issue really important? Because if both are important, you need to collaborate. If the issue is not important and the relationship is important, concede and do so quickly, because you will pay a price if you delay the concession. If the relationship's not important, the issue is super, super important, compete, right? And if neither matter, why are you spending any time worrying about this problem, right? And there's another little screen or diagnostic I think we can use that I'm getting really, really interested in these days, and that is sort of based on Heifetz's technical adaptive, but it's from another model called polarity management, and this distinguishes problems that are solvable and problems that are manageable. Problems that are solvable, again, you get the CFO, you get the spreadsheet, you knock it out, you do the math, you solve it. But there are problems that aren't solvable because they haven't been solved, number one, and that's a good sign. If it hasn't been solved yet, then it's probably, a manageable but not solvable problem. And that the options that are before you require each other. Let's go back to that question of should we centralize or decentralize. That is ever and always a challenge. You can go back and read Plutarch's Lives and read the founding stories there of Greece and Rome, and you will see that tension there. The Civil War, yes, about slavery, no question about that, but it was also a question of rights, right? And that tension, we still live with it today. It is not a solvable problem in a technical sense, but it is a manageable problem. And just to be real quick here, there are many ways to address these things, and maybe we can get to that as we go forward, but the keys to all three of these diagnostics, once you figure out it's a manageable or adaptive problem and requires collaboration, then lots of communication skills come in. Then personalization, I think that's a really important term. Another guy at MIT, Edgar Schein, who's a really important scholar of culture, wrote a book very recently called Humble Leadership, which I would commend to all of you. It's a very thin book. And he uses the term personization. And it relates to caring deeply about people, learning together, failing together. Just one last little piece and then I'll hand it off. I was doing an executive search recently for a university president, and there was a man on the search committee who had been the head of the Space Command for the United States. So, pretty smart guy. And we were interviewing candidates. We were at a hotel near an airport interviewing candidates. And he commended a particular candidate for her trying things and making mistakes. Now, other members of the search committee were critical of her for that. But this guy said, no, I think that's really important, that she tried and failed and kept going. And so after that conversation, I pulled him aside, we were having coffee, and I said, tell me about that. Where does that come from? And he said, well, do you know the story of WD-40? I said, no, not at all. And I'll cut to the quick. He said, because WD-39 didn't work. Failing together is really important.
Thank you. So, in thinking about this question of what are the most important problems under this theme of culture of care, I think we really do have a health and well-being crisis in organizations right now. And it's not just the frontline workers, although they certainly do need more support, but the middle managers I see are really getting the worst of it. They're feeling extremely squeezed with the expectations. There was a recent analysis by Gardner said that 73% of employees want more help from their manager, and 51% of their managers are saying they're already 51% over capacity. They're already doing a job and a half. It's just not possible. And so I think there, as you were saying, there are tensions. There are paradoxes that are never going to be resolved. It's never going to be resolved that everybody wants more than the other person can give. I think that's in our personal relationships. We see that in a teacher-student relationship. We see that player-coach. There's always that drive for more and more attention, more and more help. But at the same time, we can't keep going on in a system where we just keep layering on things and not subtracting anything. And so I do think, some of my research is looking at the mental health and well-being of employees. I worry about it for the people on the front lines. I worry about it for the managers. And I think we need to using some of those collaborative problem-solving techniques that you just mentioned, I think we do need to keep working on that. And I have tremendous empathy for those managers. I don't villainize them. I think that they are doing the best they can, and those who can't do it anymore are leaving. And that's not a sustainable system either.
Thank you so much. I think all of you have really highlighted such key and somewhat large issues, really the psychological safety, and I think that underlying foundational thing that needs to exist for some of the other things that both of you, Jim, you've talked about, even the diagnosis, the ability to fail together, to bring forward, what the real issues are, requires some of that, feeling of safety, being able to fail and work together and have this sense of relationship and issues. And I think that well-being, we really can't neglect this idea that what is the result of all of this, whether it's avoidance and not providing the caring and compassionate feedback and conversation can also, hurt us mentally and emotionally, and we're seeing kind of the toll of that. So really, it seems like this is, multi-layered issue. But I really want to stop for a moment and think about, Jim, you just mentioned the polarity and the tension. And one of the things we often hear about, we're right now talking about our frontline managers. But in order for some of these things that we are saying for them to happen, right, the frontline managers and supervisors are kind of in the middle. They have to somehow reconcile this tension between the folks that they supervise, but also their leadership and the folks that supervise them. So can you talk a little bit about, how would frontline managers reconcile this tension that exists between what they need to do for their teams versus what is required of them from their leadership?
Yeah, I have some thoughts about it. Reconcile assumes solution, so I'm not sure it's really fully and totally reconcilable. I think it's something that has to be tended all the time. It's like any important relationship in your life. You have to tend to the relationship and feed the relationship. In this case, we've got relationships. Borrowing another, and in a hierarchy, right? So you've got a frontline person who is in a supervisory or super powerful, if you will, position over an employee, and then that person is also supervised. So that person is between a rock and a hard place, it would be one term, right? Or trying to navigate between Scylla and Charybdis, as a classicist might refer to it. And that is very challenging. So how does one do that? Again, borrowing from Heifetz, one step is to get on the balcony. Instead of being in the arena all of the time and not having perspective of what's happening in a dynamic, to get up on the balcony and look over and try to see what's really happening here. Who is involved? Where are the issues here? So I think that can help a lot, but it's difficult often to gain perspective because you're working 150% of the time. And the boss is saying, where are the numbers? Where are the numbers? Where's the report? Where's the memo? And you can't deliver it yourself. You have a team of people who are supposed to help you deliver that. And so how do you manage the tension coming from this direction and not channel that tension in the other direction? That's certainly a challenge. I think the kind of candor and communication with the side that's imposing upon the middle manager is critically important so that there are clear expectations. Clear roles and responsibilities, but I think that that's not enough because that assumes, that's important, but it's table stakes. It really assumes a sort of bureaucratic culture. Yes, I wrote it down. Here's my authority, right? Here's my role. Here's my responsibility. If that's all we do, we might have a functional organization, but it's not one that cares about people. It'll get the work done, begrudgingly, but it doesn't care about people. So I think personizing those relationships, to borrow Schein's term, is really, really important. So making oneself a little more vulnerable. Self-deprecating humor, maybe to some extent. Failing together, learning together, going through an after-action review. I did one 2 days ago with one of my teams. And I won't go into the specific project, but I started out by saying with the team, and everybody had a little issue during the project. It's going to be a really successful project, but it cost more money and it took a lot more time to get done than planned. But I started out by saying, I screwed up here because I didn't make sure that we had a good, solid plan with knowing how much time it was going to take, from all of you and all the details, getting your input in building the plan, and I apologize for that. And then I moved from self-criticism as the person in the power position, so bringing myself down to the level of everyone, not the commander, if you will, but bringing myself down consciously and deliberately. And then I moved up and started talking about the positives of what people did and commended them, validated the positive things they did, the extra work they did to make this project work. And then I invited them, and they're feeling comfortable now. They have some psychological safety now because I criticized myself, I modeled that behavior, and then commended them for stepping in and doing good work. Then I asked them, what do they think they could have done better? And they had that safety then, that license to share their views. And then I riffed off of that to, okay, yeah, there's some things now that we can do better because we're going to do this same kind of campaign again. And it's going to be better next time. So I think that's an example and a case of how one can do that.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're talking about is really the deep intention and attention that is necessary. And it requires so much time just to even process and plan for these things. So, Connie, I know so much of your work has focused on well-being and really helping managers think about how to even prioritize perhaps what's really important from all of the things that are coming at us. Can you speak a little bit to, how managers can balance these priorities so that they can focus on what's important, perhaps the intention and attention?
Well, the first thing that they're going to need to do is get the cooperation of their own superiors to be able to take a step back and think about changes in their job. And I like the fact, Jim, that you talked about negotiations. One of my first recommendations when someone comes to me and says they're burned out is, have you thought about taking a negotiations class? Because truly, a lot of what needs to happen here is a renegotiation of your job and the expectations for it. And there are skills that can be taught. I teach negotiations. It's not a sell pitch, but here at BU, and I can tell you people can get better with the right kinds of training and in a way that makes them feel authentic and effective. So that's part of it, is nothing's going to change if you're getting pushback from above that's limiting your degrees of freedom. But assuming that they are willing to let you rethink your job, I would think about changing the structures of your job, and I would also look for help in any way you can, including through AI. So I wrote a paper last year with Kate Kellogg at MIT where we looked at the use of AI in managerial coaching. And here's an example of where there's that kind of polarity, that tension, that we know the more junior and frontline employees are looking for more hands-on support and guidance from their managers. And the managers theoretically would love to do that, but they don't have enough time. And so we looked at tools that can be inserted to help make that process more efficient and effective for the manager. So for example, looking at ways that AI can be, one of the companies we studied is in the area of therapy, which is not the first place you think of to be able to use AI. But there's a product that can help them record the notes and actually summarize what's happening during a therapeutic session. And then when the supervisor of that person wants to give them guidance, they can quickly distill key moments in those sessions, things that maybe could have gone better, techniques that were used or other techniques that weren't used. And so when they sit down with that person, they don't need to spend the first half an hour trying to get a download on what happened or who was there or what they tried. They have that information and then they can build from there. And that can be done in all sorts of jobs, thinking about ways that you can actually try to help your employees without doing all of the legwork and the analytic work yourself, which takes a tremendous amount of time. And then another thing that I would just talk about is, it really does require organizational changes, not just more than getting a support from your superiors. It's maybe the system of the company isn't structured appropriately to allow people to manage their lives effectively. There's only so many things, again, that you can do by yourself. There's an article title that I love to quote called "You Cannot Yoga Your Way Out of Burnout." And that's true. So I don't think we should be looking for people to solve some of these challenges by themselves, whether you're a manager or a frontline person. It does take a system. It takes collaboration across to take a big look at what's going on and saying, you know, what are our priorities here? And are we seeing people burned out? Are we seeing people leave? Are we seeing our productivity decrease? And another thing I study is loneliness. Are we seeing people feeling disconnected? Those are all symptoms of a system. And so the system has to be changed.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really love that holistic lens of looking not just at the individual, but really looking at the system, and burnout being equally an issue of the person, but also of the workplace. So it's really important to pay attention to that, and also in ways that technology can help reduce the burden, and that's obviously something we are deeply in conversation. Here at Boston University, I'm part of the administrating task force that's putting all kinds of governances around AI, and we are hearing the term a critical embrace, that we're going to embrace this technology, and yet we're going to have to be critical of it. And so, Angelique, that really makes me think about what are all the questions, what we need to think about from the lens of bias and DEI as we are embracing technologies and to support our managers, right? To do what is most important is care and take the time to give feedback and such.
Absolutely. So 3 things going into that, and I'm glad you brought up the implicit bias piece to it. When we think about our let's say, CRM, and there are 3 things that I don't think we would disagree on in this room, if you may, right? Bad data in, bad data out, right? I see the nods. That's the one thing. Secondly, AI is grounded in algorithms that were created by humans, right? We can agree on that. Thirdly, we all have bias, right? We all have bias. It's not our fault. It doesn't make us bad people. We can agree on that, right? Perfect example. I know we have a virtual group, and we have a group here in person. Quick exercise. I'm going to ask you to say folk, F-O-L-K. I'm in Miami, down south. Folklore is a good way. How y'all folks doing, right? Folk, F-O-L-K. We're going to say it in unison 5 times, and then I'm going to ask you a quick question, all right? No, literally. I know the audio and the AV people are like, oh, what is she doing? But we're going to do it together, right? 5 times. Folk, F-O-L-K, and I'm going to ask you a quick question, you answer. Go. Folk, 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 folk. Now, what do you call the white of an egg? Answer it. Oh, no, exactly. No. Now, you see how our biases... That bias, immediately, I'm able to program you based on what we've learned over the years, associative memory, all right? What do you call the white of an egg?
Right.
Thank you. The white of an egg, right?
I fell for it.
And you fell for it.
I did.
And it's what we fall for each and every day of our lives. Right? When we talk about systems design, when we talk about AI, because the things that we need to consider when it comes to that, it's imperative as a manager, supervisor, to understand our bias, because we all have it. It's not your fault. You're not a bad person. Right? But it's knowing when it shows up, how it shows up, and also understanding that these system designs, organizations were designed by HR systems, student learning management systems, all of this. AI is no different, and it's not a monolith, it's not polarizing it. Both need to coexist, period. I'm like ChatGPT and everything that AI is bringing, I am embracing it. It's in your phone. It's in everything that we do. However, when we think about the human factor of it, as supervisors, managers, leaders, we have to understand that great designs are meant to be experienced, and also knowing that racism and exclusion is invisible, and it navigates through every process and design. What do we do about it as a result of it, right? So we can embrace it, we can lean on it, and when it comes to us, we have to develop this capacity to see how these systems provide advantages for certain people, but not all. Hence why it's so important that inclusion, like diversity is counting heads, inclusion is making heads count. How can we make these people, these individuals, these processes, how the algorithms and the outputs of each and every one of them, right, count in terms of our goals, our objectives, and making sure that we're not repeating history as a result of it, right? So connecting our bias to embracing, you know, the AI and where we're going in terms of technology, it's important to keep ourselves grounded in it, and then educating ourselves not only from our own individual standpoint, because it's an individual, it's a team, and it's an organizational piece. How do we change that, and how do we sort of navigate through it all as well?
That's great, thank you. That is so important, and something that, of course, we are all grappling with, and really becoming more and more important that we pay attention to this. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you shedding a little bit of light on that. So I want to come back to the charge here that, you know, is so important. Amanda speaks about this with us a lot, is creating a caring workplace, right? That's founded in inclusive excellence, and this needs a lot of intention. So Jim, I'm going to turn it to you. You've spoken a little bit about what supervisors can do, but what are the most effective ways you see that managers' behaviors can help to shift the culture?
Well, respecting people, being self-critical. To take Angelique's point, to study oneself, know thyself, and seek to understand one's biases, I think is critically important, because they are blind spots behind which there are real people with real dreams and real aspirations. And so if we're blind to those because we are imposing, whether it's intentional or not, some blind spot on that, that's not caring, that's for sure. I think being emotionally vulnerable, as Allison shared with us, that's a good example of it. Showing people that you actually have a heart as opposed to just a brain. I had a leader one time say to me, you know, if you want people to follow you, you have to let them know what you think and how you think. But if you want them to follow you doing something that's really difficult, that's transformative, you actually have to, and he wasn't literally saying this, but metaphorically, you have to take your heart out and you have to show it to them. That's hard to do. It's really, really difficult to do. And it becomes harder to do after it's been stepped on, which is one of the major leadership dilemmas, right? When you put yourself out there and you experience something very painful as a result of that. But I would encourage you to stay the course, because it's not about getting knocked down when you try to create a caring culture. It's about how you get back up and rebound or recover from that experience. We all make mistakes. I was chatting with a friend this morning talking about failure and mistakes and how, you know, you don't make it into the baseball, well, to make it into the Baseball Hall of Fame, you're failing 2/3 of the time. It's important to remember that, right? So I think grace is a really important value. Humility is a really important, and demonstrating it. And, you know, if your people make mistakes, okay. How can we work together? How did that happen? Let's work together as a team so that we can avoid that in the future or minimize that in the future.
It's like failing forward, Jen,
Yeah.
right? You can fail forward,
Yeah.
right? And then be vulnerable. But then it's also that level of self-disclosure, because some people, when they're vulnerable, I'm low self-disclosure. I won't share a lot about me, but then you have to be agile with what you're sharing as a result.
But going to one of these predictive tensions, so control and vulnerability, right? Somebody who needs to be in control of something because the boss expects them to be in control of something, it's hard to be vulnerable with your people at the same time.
Yeah.
But you're not going to personize, Edgar Schein's term, you're not going to personize your organization if you're not to some extent vulnerable. Because then it all is roles and responsibilities, org charts, processes. It's a bureaucratic exercise, which is, again, not evil, but it's not what we want. And it's not where we want to contribute. We don't have to work where we work. Hopefully we can make choices, and we can choose to be in a place that is lifting people up and personalizing people. Yeah. Something I want to just share one more little insight here, that I was going through a really tough set of challenges some years back. Quickly, the governor of the state, I was the head of the university system in the state, and 3 days before the beginning of the fiscal year, he vetoed our budget 41%. So that's a whopper, right? And that was a very difficult challenge to go through. Had to go into financial exigency and come out and do all kinds of things. In any case, my wife suggested, because she knows how I learn, which is not for her to tell me how to fix myself, but she gives me titles. And so she said, you need to read this book. And it's by, and I'm, okay, sure, Mary. And it's by Pema Chodron. I don't know if you know her work. She's a Buddhist nun. And the book is called Welcoming the Unwelcome. And as I read into the book, I thought, okay, I do some of this stuff, like when I'm sitting in horrible meetings, I count 6 inhalations and I count 6 exhalations, and I do practice those things, right? But what I learned from that book and from her was that these people are not your enemies, they're your opponents. These people are your very best teachers.
Absolutely.
About what you need to learn, if only about what their concerns are, if you're their leader.
Yeah.
So I commend that work, because it's, again, sort of radically humiliating in a way, but in a positive way. It's not humiliation like you're embarrassed or anything like that, but it humbles one. And I think that's a really important way to create a caring organization, is to be caring.
So I want to pick up on that, because I'm very much somebody who believes in this idea of humble leadership. We use it a lot in our teaching. We use actually, the humble inquiry and all of that, and being vulnerable. And all of that is, really important and yet really hard, especially for some of us and folks from, marginalized communities, folks who may not fit that. Even, some of the examples you gave, Allison, as as we are looking to be promoted, what makes us not ready? What do we need to do? And sometimes being vulnerable is not quite as easy. So, I don't know, Angelique, if you can talk a little bit about how do folks in, marginalized managers, when we're asking them to be vulnerable and humble and self-critical, how do they navigate that? Because that isn't easy, I can say, is for myself, and something I am deeply aware of, as we push some of these ideas out. How are we helping, those folks navigate?
So as someone who is African American, Bahamian American, Gen X, cisgendered, from the South, not of the South, if you may, there's a lot that comes with it. I attended an HBCU. When we think about who we are as Blacks, and again, this is not a monolith. Again, I'm speaking from my voice and my identity. We were not afforded the opportunity to make a mistake, right? To have emotional freedom, right? You have to show up, do your thing, and there's this concept called Black excellence. And it comes with all of these other things. Another workshop, another day, we can talk about that. Just saying, right? We are the first, and we also understand that sometimes when we are provided this opportunity, there are additional individuals who will follow in our footsteps. So there's a lot of pressure that comes with that as a result, right? I will say that whites normally, not everyone, whites normally do not see or live life in that fashion, right? We think about this every day. We represent who that is every day as a result, right? So I will say that the system doesn't necessarily work in our favor because we talk about we don't see color, but we actually do. Again, another topic, another day, just saying. Former president of Spelman College, Beverly Tatum, wrote a book called Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? Okay? It's a book about the psychology of racism and self-segregation, and the reason of the self-segregation because it's a coping strategy as a result. So when you think about your managers connecting and seeing that lived experience, that connectivity of self-identification with direct reports as a result, and the time spent that's needed, it's everything that I've explained earlier on and then some. That's an abbreviated version, just so that you know. All right? So as a result, what can institutions do? What can divisions do, organizations do to support these individuals? It's thinking about the cultural contribution that is so important to the organization because we come from different generations. I'm a Gen X. I don't mind disclosing that piece. We're in the middle. You have the silent baby boomers on one side, millennials, Z, et cetera, on the other. So we're trying to build that bridge, which comes from pressure and knowing that it's nuanced from an organizational standpoint, right? And as a manager, I know if my direct report comes to me, I know what that looks like from navigating and managing up, down, and around an organization, and the importance of them being successful because I'm taking on that burden emotionally and mentally, that head-heart piece that Jim kind of talked to. As an institution, it's important to provide mentorship programs, right? ERGs, employee resource groups, as a result, when you're thinking about that. Professional development opportunities outside of Boston University or your institution is critical. So if you have a direct report saying, okay, I would like to attend an Asian American in higher education session or a transgender leadership retreat, absolutely. Because those are things that you wouldn't be able to capture in your role, or it's just this added piece as an individual with varying identities, if you may. A couple of other pieces, if you may. Executive coaching. We sometimes see that as a way of, okay, bad behavior, let me get you a coach, but let's do that from a proactive standpoint when you're recruiting someone in, knowing your environment, because you want to change culture. When you start reinforcing the same culture as opposed to thinking about things innovatively, then you are keeping the culture as opposed to changing what could happen from that point forward. And then even something a little bit different is adapting performance evaluations as well, because it is emotionally laborious at times being chocolate-coated as a leader in an organization, that managing up and down and being pulled all around and living my values as an individual. But if you're able to take in consideration the performance evaluation add-on that is already embedded into a culture, how am I spending that extra time with retention and making sure that everyone is being included by their individual characteristics according to what that need is, then that's the way in which an institution can provide that 360 support for individuals and teams and supervisors.
Nice.
Thank you. That's really poignant. And I want to turn to Connie. You know, again, well-being is really, really important. And what are your, what practical tips can you share that are really important, that are very important to how culture is, because well-being is kind of almost symptomatic of a culture. And so what are some ways that managers can really start to incorporate this idea of well-being into the daily life of their teams?
I think the first thing I would focus on is relationship building. I don't think I would dive deeply into understanding the psyche of everyone on the team and where they are, in terms of well-being at a mental health level. I don't think most managers are trained for that, although I'm a big fan of mental health first aid training and any kind of informative, fact-based training that helps people understand what others might be going through. But I think relationships are accessible to everyone. It's a great solve for all sorts of problems, whether it's the loneliness problem or burnout, or feeling like you can't get ahead in this world, or feeling excluded and marginalized. And so for managers, I just finished writing a manuscript last night about a new study I have on looking at loneliness in particular. And we asked all sorts of different questions, including what can your manager do? So we really wanted to get down to that. And a lot of it is actually pretty simple advice, but it's just not taken. So first thing is make it a priority. And what does it look like if it's a priority? It means it happens during the day when people are paid. It's not something that's optional that people to either give up their personal time for, or it's something that it happens during the day, but then they have to work later that night to make up for it. So one is making those kinds of relationship building activities more of a real priority, which will again require adjusting the work itself and maybe slowing things down or carving out certain times or taking meetings off the calendar. So that's one thing. The other thing is people really like routines, and they like predictability. So much of work, and this goes back to Edgar Schein, who's sort of the lion in our world of organizational culture, talked about, a lot of organizational life is about managing anxiety. We all have it. And so what helps with anxiety? Predictability and control. And so if you're going to focus on building relationships, then build in regular touch points throughout your cadence as an organization, so that people don't have to wonder, is there going to be a happy hour next month, and do I need to mentally prepare for that? Do I need to carve out time? It sort of build it in. We actually did this examination of 8 different types of relationship building activities, and then we grouped people by high loneliness, low loneliness, in the middle, and across every type of organizational social opportunity we studied, the least lonely people just had more frequent. It wasn't even that they had different ones. We also had a question where we asked people, what do you really want to go to at work? And the top 3, the number 1 was free lunch. So, right. We do Quest or Meets now at BU. I mean, people just like food. So it's not that hard, but they want to be able to count on it, maybe the last Friday of every month. The next one after that was devoting just 5 or 10 minutes to meeting chit-chat. And that's just a way, and I suggest using it in a structured manner, not just open-ended, especially if you're on Zoom, because the talkers will talk and the other people stay quiet. But use the chat function, ask a question, everybody has to answer it. Or if you're in person, you pull out, there's many different people producing conversation cards, pull out a conversation card. It doesn't have to take that long. Microsoft now embedded in Teams has games you can play. You can play like an actual collective game together at the start of meetings. So there's lots of things you can do that aren't that time consuming, but make it a regular practice. People can anticipate it, they can count on it, they can start to engage in it. And then the third thing that people did want were happy hours. And that's partly because you think about generational differences. If you want to capture some of the newer people who are really looking for those relationships, the millennials, but mostly the Gen Zs, they're looking for more of what they consider to be normal social time. And some of that would be after work. But again, I would make that part of the day, maybe start at 4:30, so that people don't have to carve out from their dinner time and times with their family as well. So that's it. I mean, we asked about all sorts of different programs, and they may be really valuable in certain cases. But I would say keep it simple, keep it repeatable, and just really make it part of your culture, and you'll start to see a difference.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we are almost at time, and I want to get us to the, not an happy hour, but a little reception afterwards. I love all of the practical tips, and again, this very holistic lens of looking at psychological safety, our lived and learned experiences, being intentional, thinking about the system and the individual, and again, not paying attention to the simple things. We focus so much on what are the big things we can implement, and we forego the simple things like connecting, building that relationship, taking that time, giving the feedback, being caring, and how do we start to prioritize our time so that we have enough time as managers to really focus on what's important. So thank you so much for all of the wonderful tips and insights that all of you brought here. It's so exciting, and we can continue this conversation for a long time. But I would love to open it up here to the folks in the room and see if we have any questions.
I certainly would love to ask a question, not surprising. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much to the panel. Mumtaz is our moderator, really excellent. Was writing furiously. One of the tensions, I think, going back to the polarity of intention that was mentioned, and all of you contributed in one way or another in your responses today to speak to that and describe it in a real impactful way. So I want to talk about that in my question. I'd love for you to mention for us, how does that intention improve when a manager wants to go far with the team, and some of the characteristics, Jim, you talked about, right, with leaders, and impact those strategies, those practical tips, Connie, that you mentioned? How does a manager do that when their supervisor above them wants to go fast? Mm-hmm. I know this question could take a long time, but in the short time that we have.
May I use a sports metaphor?
Please use whatever will help us learn.
So the UCLA men's basketball team won the national championship, I'm going to say 10, 11 years in a row. Can you imagine that? In a row. And the coach, famous guy, actually has leadership books out there, and this is a fast-paced game, right? So speed wins. But at the first practice of every season, so these people are coming back, they won it last year, and the year before, and the year before. They know what they're doing. They have technical expertise. And the coach walks into the locker room as they're getting ready to go out to their first practice of the new season and reminds them about how to put their socks on correctly and how to tie their shoes correctly so that they don't get blisters. And then they go out on the floor and he says, these are all men in this case, gentlemen, this is a basketball. This is how we dribble. This is how we pass. So my story basically is, in this case, going back to the basics. I don't know if that answers the question really, but to be aware of the fundamentals, whether they're fundamental values or fundamental principles or the cover story of an organization, whatever is that gives meaning to what the group is doing. It's absolutely critical. So maybe in this case, the team leader knows that there is this higher purpose and this person is getting a ton of pressure from above. Well, what are that person's values? And so how does one tie oneself to those values in order to then leverage the space your team needs to succeed? We do that all the time, right? It's an interest-based negotiation trick. So Connie said X. I remember. Connie said X. Connie, you said X, right? And I can leverage that for something that my team needs. So that's a thought.
Yes. Sorry, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, too, when someone wants to go really fast and I got the impression you want to go slow for a reason in this hypothetical scenario, that perhaps you think that rushing is not a good idea, you need more information or data. I really do think that yes, there's definitely negotiation techniques and influence that needs to happen, but so much of this is understanding your boss, and you just started to allude to this, but what are their pressures? Why is fast? And really kind of break down, instead of this project needs to be done on this time and there's no negotiation over that, to understand, well, what is the goal of that fast? Is it for this part to be known, or is it to prevent a competitor in a market sense? And then just creatively try to figure out different ways that you can slice off the most critical aspect of that and see if that can happen, but while the other parts maybe can be. I used to be a consultant, so I spent a lot of time, having these conversations where, that's not practical, but let's get some data behind it and show you this data, and then together we can look at it and say, well, this could happen, but that can't happen. And so, it's easier said than done, obviously, especially if you're talking about things that it's hard to get data for, and that's one of your challenges. But I do think that, it's not a good idea just as a general practice to say no to your boss when they have something really important they want you to do at a certain time, But I think that you can certainly kind of get below that blanket mandate and say, okay, I can deliver you this, but let's talk about that, and then see if there's a satisfying solution.
Thank you so much. Right, please.
Great answer. I like the metaphor about sports. I'm a sports guy too. So think about the expectations. How did you manage the expectations, or how would a coach manage those expectations of your employees who are on this pace to exceed to the highest level faster than what you're allowing them to, right? You give them professional development, but they want to exceed beyond your management style or profile. So it's that the employee wants to be the manager, and then the boss within the time frame of a year. Because that's our students, right? Our highly successful students are on that pathway, and they go into the workforce thinking that same way, get to the highest point as fast as possible. So how do you manage those expectations that is beneficial to something to be successful?
I've got one, but my colleagues here, I'm sure, have others. Let them fail. Give them an opportunity to fail in a safe way. And they'll go, oh, fill in the blank. I just screwed up. Maybe my manager knows something I don't know. Maybe I need some help here. But to let people fail is really, really important. And again, without creating harm or anything. But I think that's a valuable opportunity for people to learn and set expectations more reasonably.
And some of it can be grounded in wisdom and experience, right? So creating a scenario or a case study based on something that we know would take experiential learning and that wisdom piece of it, combined with that, I think reinforces that example.
Your question reminds me of, I usually teach the very first class that our part-time MBA students take here at Questrom, and they're usually in their late 20s, early 30s, so they've achieved some success in their careers. They want to advance, so they keep their day job. They come to school at night. Hardworking, intelligent, capable people, and they usually do fail on their first assignment. But the way I set it up is so that they can learn from that failure in a really structured way. So here's how I learned this through practice, trial and error over time. So one of the projects is to analyze an organization and analyze a problem the organization has faced. Originally, I used to let them analyze their own organization, but there was too much variance. And so I would give them feedback, and they wouldn't believe me that it wasn't good. And so then I thought, this is, exhausting for me to spend all this time talking to 55 students about why their papers weren't better. Because frankly, most of them don't do well on that first one. They're not used to that kind of analysis and that kind of writing. So then I decided, okay, well, I'm going to have to standardize this, because then I can have an exemplar of what a good analysis of this same case is. So I removed it from talking about their own organizations, gave them a detailed case from a case library like one at Harvard Business School. So then that helped, because then I could post like the best paper in the class afterwards, anonymized, and then they can compare theirs, and that gave them a little insight. But frankly, they still kind of said, I still think mine's better than the grade you gave me, Professor Hadley. So we still had a problem. So then I thought, all right, so now I've got to diversify not, who they get the feedback from. So then I set up peer groups. So then what they had to do was submit their papers. They're already in learning teams that we created for other purposes in the semester. So they had some already built up trust and understanding of each other. And I had them then take each other's papers and give 3 positives and 3 negatives about that, and then deliver that feedback to people. And boy, did that change their attitudes. Because it was not just me giving them that feedback, it was them realizing not only if I heard it from 5 other people besides Professor Hadley, I guess I really didn't do this. That's right. But even better was by the act of them reviewing someone else's paper, they got so much smarter about the assignment. And they saw variance in each other's papers in a way that taught them more than I could ever do by myself. So the same philosophy I would approach if I was working with junior people who were ready to advance and keen to that. Encourage that ambition, absolutely, but find ways to give them structured assignments where they can get real feedback and compare and learn from each other, because that's going to save everybody a whole lot of time and also make them much more motivated, because they're going to start also realizing that there is a process they can learn to get better, and that's the point of how I run these assignments. Each one gets more challenging, and they help each other along the way.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it pulls really neatly into the workplace, right? Because there's research that shows that people tend to improve more when there's peer feedback, and not just feedback from your managers, but also from your colleagues with whom you work. And people are more open to it, and they're able to get a broader perspective about something that they're working on. So I guess there's a line connection there. Wanted to check in with Carla. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question from our online audience.
Yes.
How does advancing a culture of care work in a hybrid environment?
Beautiful, beautiful. Connie, did you want to take
I feel like I talked a lot. Does anybody else want to take that first?
Yeah, I work in a hybrid, mostly virtual environment. And one example for the person writing in from online is that while my people can see my calendar and the details of it, and I can see their calendars and the details of their calendars, I encourage them to put in their calendar dance class, lunch with Carissa, stuff that is not technically work stuff, but it's personizing, I guess you could say. So on my noon every day, even though I probably have lots of meetings at noon, it's walk Max, my corgi dog, okay? Every day it's there. Everybody knows Max. We have a team, we use Teams, and the name of our team is Team Corgi. To personalize things, and Max will come in and bark sometimes during meetings, etc. I think, people have cats. I do search work, right? We have search committees online doing Zoom interviews of people, and cats are climbing all over people, and they think, is that a bad thing? No, that's a really, really good thing. So I think there are ways of allowing people, that's a power term, of encouraging people to be themselves online that can still connect them to the larger group and the larger purpose.
Yeah. Anything to add from the...
No, I would agree with everything that was said. It's important to have that human factor, both when you're on site, making sure that you're together, but it's understanding the behavior, because I think we went in, there's this little sort of anchor bias. Like we're fixated on this one piece of information, and regardless of what comes in, we're still fixated on that one thing. And whether it's based on your identity, your age, et cetera, it helps us to be agile with that. When you talked about executive search, because I did do that as well, I can recall conducting a search for a CHRO, and it was an Indian woman. And the search committee said, well, we enjoyed the candidate, but the candidate closed their eyes a lot, right? And I thought, oh my goodness, as a neurodivergent person, I close my eyes a lot because I have to shut down the sensory, right? And that's the easiest one to do it at that moment because I can taste, I can hear, I can't shut up my smell and all that, right? And so I had to talk them through that. The same happened with a search committee at our Research One institution where the dog walked into the screen and they did not want to move that candidate forward as a result. Wow. Yeah. Right? So all that kind of came, it was triggering to me when Jim was talking at that point in time. This was pre-COVID. That's that piece of now, everyone's accepting of this hybrid environment, but now we're more accepting of it. So imagine fast forwarding back in 2015 when these conversations came about. And not knowing that she could be neurodivergent, because I'm here on stage and I was like, okay, you're gonna close your eyes, and I know it, and I'm comfortable in my skin because it doesn't impact my brain and me being able to do the job, right? So it's important to get to know people from a personal, how do you, what's the term? Personalization standpoint. In addition to the hybrid, because we can make inferences and judgments based on what we see on the screen, but it's the duality of it all that is so super important at the same time.
And I'll just say one more thing about the hybrid, which is, the intentionality is the theme of my advice, and again, consistency is the second theme. So I do think that working in different modes is more challenging logistically, but it's still far and away the most preferred from most people that we've been studying. So it's gonna stick, so you gotta figure it out. And I think one way you can do that is, I'll use another classroom example. When we were doing, we had this thing called LFA, Learning from Everywhere, Anywhere, I think was a thing, and that was during the 2020 fall and 2021 spring, and we did have students. I'd sit in a classroom and have 3 students in the room, and then another 50 online, and it was really difficult to teach to that 2 different groups at once, and so we had to add new jobs. We added jobs to help with that. So I had a hands-up helper. And that was because I'm talking and I can't watch the thing to see if somebody's raising their hand, either on screen and sometimes even in the classroom. So there would be somebody who was in charge of monitoring that and breaking in when I needed to hear that. We also had a discussion Kickstarter. So that's someone who would spend a little extra time with their readings beforehand, and I would give them some prep questions and say, these are the questions I'm going to ask. I want you to open the discussion. So give them some time to prepare. And then we also had people who ran online forums to continue the conversation offline. So when you think about hybrid work, it is a lot about systems. Again, this idea of what have you built in to give people lots of ways to contribute, to learn, and to connect with each other, and made it kind of easy and take advantage of that, the opportunities of being both in person and online can afford you. And trying to just get those set up. If somebody may not work out, you may not like a discussion Kickstarter role, but that's okay. But just say, we're trying it for these reasons, and let's put this in place and give it 6 weeks and see what happens. And so there's so much more I feel that's not being done yet to help hybrid work be better. And I have full confidence that we can make it a better way of working that will give us some autonomy and give us some in-person time and all the benefits of that.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent.
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, over here.
And we're like, okay.
Where's Waldo?
we have this glare in front of us. So.
Sorry. So I really liked what Connie was talking about with getting that kind of what I'm going to call 360 feedback. And as a people manager in the past, I've found that, and also as a recipient of feedback in any scenario, if you're receptive to getting that feedback to begin with, it can be a lot more effective. And also I just want to kind of call out a couple of experiences that I had that created a culture where it was okay to give and receive feedback. And that one time was when I was a graphic design student, and critiques were part of it. And boy, was it tough when we first had to start doing it. But by the end of the semester, everyone got it. Everyone asked for it, couldn't wait for it. People were very excited to give it and were better at giving more constructive feedback instead of, oh, that's nice. Or the font, the font size is the wrong size. And then I also worked at a corporation that I will not name, and this was a few years ago, but it was kind of interesting because after, I think it was almost weekly, we had to send out to someone with whom we had had an encounter, basically an NPS survey. So everyone was getting NPS scores regularly. It was very interesting, but I think what I'm kind of getting at is, have you experienced that maybe creating a culture where asking for feedback and craving it has improved the entire feedback loop?
Okay, well, thank you. So I can tell you about a group that I've been working with for 2.5 years. Their leader was determined to have a speak-up culture. And it has been a real marvel to watch unfold, and I've played a small part in that, educating them about the value of psychological safety, and one of the main benefits is being able to give and receive more authentic feedback. And this one was a company where people used to be stack ranked, where like somebody always had to be like in the bottom 10, 15%, very few would make in the top. So it had been a really competitive and in some ways, very challenging climate to be in before, but they wanted to change that. So they did change the performance rating system, which is a big part of what was helpful. But a lot of it was, again, like you were saying there, normalizing feedback, just making it part of the routine, instead of saying that this has to be, something that only one person, like a one-way, feedback. I'm giving you downwards, you never get it back up. And I love your graphic design one, because I can imagine, graphic design is really personal. In some ways, it's hard to hear feedback on it if you really like it, but other people don't. It's not so concrete. But it sounds like you were able to do that because you were able to make it normal for everybody to do that. So in this particular client, they had town halls. They did a survey, private survey, anonymous survey that I helped them with that really opened the eyes of leaders. And they started putting new practices in place. It's still a work in progress, though. It's 2.5 years, but it's so much better. And again, I wanted to say it needed the leader at the top. It needed the ability to change some of the ways people were rewarded and promoted. And then just a lot of talking and practice that's made the difference.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I also think that assessments are important, right? I talked about assessments from the standpoint of an organizational assessment. You can do it from a division, a department, a team, right? Super and critically impactful, because not only are you receiving the feedback from employees, whether it be a Likert scale, right? But also when you're able to do that from the standpoint that's providing the psychological safety of the individuals involved, as well as having it done with many, let's say in the room, or whether it's an open-ended survey, the key part is understanding how it shows up when it shows up, right? And why it shows up. Right? Because the individual one-on-one feedback, who the source is at some point in time. But with the assessments, it's not only understanding that it exists, but those variations of it within the organization, and you can directly create a strategy and a process in terms of how to address it at that point in time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that lens to see some of the trends that are so important. I believe there's one. I think we have time for one last question before we wrap up.
Thank you, everyone. I just have a quick question, and it's about shared vision. Mm-hmm. So my big question is, how do you create and cultivate shared vision? And how to navigate a workplace culture when there is an absence of shared vision?
Excellent question.
Visions are really difficult to create. Often in our literature and our cultures, they come from on high, right? and then we gather around and follow that vision. I think, we talked a little bit about negotiation as a model. Actually following that standard interest-based negotiation set of questions and steps. If the question is, what is our shared value? Okay. Or what is our shared vision? Everybody gets to talk. Okay, that's interesting. And we're writing everything down, no judgment, inclusion completely. What data do we have about the vision? Is it ridiculous for us to expect to climb that mountain with all of these people? As a trite example, but okay. We have the data. What are our interests? We all want to climb the mountain. We all want to be honest and safe and team players, et cetera, et cetera. What are the standards? It's going to be in winter and we're climbing the mountain. Silly, really? I mean, shouldn't we do it at another time of year? But, and then, what are the options for getting it done? And then for the vision, and then you can apply the interests and standards to the old visions, and you end up, in my experience, not looking at visions per se, but many other things with a solution that the group has essentially agreed to. So that's one alternative to just getting a vision from on high and pursuing that. And then again, I want to commend a really important C word that Allison used in her talk, in addition to culture, but choice. We do have choices, thankfully, in this society. Some are constrained, no question about that. But if, I've chosen to leave organizations several times because I didn't share the vision, I didn't share the values. And that's an important freedom. I mean, somebody talked about exit, voice, and loyalty. I remember reading that book in grad school back in the 19th century. And so, again, appreciate your raising it, but exit needs to be an option.
Absolutely. One more question? Okay.
All right.
Quick one. Oh, great. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to just come clean and say that I daydreamed through the seminar. And I don't need a response, really. I just wanted to say that you inspired that. And the takeaway is these other words like passion, which we touched on, and that's maybe part of the answer to that question. I feel like I'm lucky that I'm in a team that has a passionate leadership. Sorry.
It's okay.
So my point is, today at a staff meeting, we recounted an event that happened last night, which took 5 or 6 months to plan. It was not a failure. Mm-hmm. It was good. And I wrote it in the column of our shared Google Doc. This was an important collaboration. Mm-hmm. And while I was writing it, I was so annoyed and irritated because that's something I'm really passionate about for decades. And I feel like that's a value I bring to the institution. And when I wrote it, I just thought, did we really collaborate? Yeah, we did, but it was uphill, up that muddy bank with, carrying a bag of boulders. But I feel better now after this seminar, because I think I'm going to bring some of these things to my group.
All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
That's a lovely way to end us out.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the values, right? When you're talking about vision and values, like every institution would have core values. The vision will come from leadership and or working, you co-design that with your team. What's our vision for this initial project and what have you? It's important to understand as a supervisor, manager, leader, you will have core values that you will have, but how does that show up on a day-to-day basis? And everything that you do should reflect that and fall within that. One of the pieces is conflict resolution. We all have conflict within an organization, but how you acknowledge that the conflict exists, how you resolve and or solve for that conflict, how you support that conflict, all fall within the same set of values of who you are as an individual. and applying that to every situation. Tim, you stood up and you talked about that particular experience. It's important for us to stay core to those values, because we've all have mentioned that. And if at any point where there's a misalignment in it, right, and we think about the behavior that comes about it, right, we can all disagree on certain things from an institutional level, but I think all of our values are aligned in terms of what we feel are equitable sort of behavioral concepts and how we define it, and we have the opportunity to redefine what that is based on our core values as a collective unit, if you may.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is such a beautiful way to wrap us up, because I really, really think as we're thinking about culture, values center us, they ground us, they help us to remember why we are and why we are working together. Even if we go a little bit away, it helps to bring us back. And so thank you. That was really, really quite beautiful. And thank you again to Connie, Jim, and Angelique for all of their insights, and to you, Allison, for setting up this groundwork for us to have this lovely and insightful conversation this afternoon.
Wow, wow, wow. The doctors came to BU, and I think we got the therapy we needed. Let me start with first thanking Dr. Allison Vaillancourt for her excellent keynote. And our panel guests, Dr. Angelique Grant, Dr. Jim Johnsen, Dr. Connie Hadley. Thank you all. Last, I always have the pleasure of working with our esteemed panel moderator on a daily basis, Mumtaz Badshah-Brown. Thank you so much. And as we wrap up, and I mentioned I was writing furiously, I really was, a few key takeaways that I thought we might enjoy as we move forward and look forward to our recorded session. Really happy to see some of my colleagues here today. From Dr. Vaillancourt, some of the myriad ways of the impact that we can think about for constructive feedback, right? It's easy, cheap, fast, right? Constructive feedback. Remember that 34% of our colleagues, including ourselves, are getting regular feedback. Only 34%. So are you getting feedback that's kind, radically candid, caring, or cruel? Small things to think about. From our guests, a few things to think about that I certainly wrote, and I hope that you wrote some of your own. From Dr. Grant, the critical value of psychological safety at work. It's becoming ever more important. Biggest challenge today. What are our 360-degree supports? What are some techniques? Remember brainwriting versus brainstorming. Love that. And the AI implications around bad data in, bad data out. We all have biases. Thank you for that. And it is created by humans. Not to be afraid, they're just implications. From Dr. Jim Johnsen, a few things that I wrote about. Collaboration hinges on two fundamentals, bringing it back, issues and relationships. And of course, WD 939 didn't work. Thank you. So true. I am going to remember that for many, many weeks to come. And finally, the esteemed Dr. Hadley, who we love to have join us on these panels. Know thyself, know thy blind spots. Renegotiating is so necessary with the level of disruption that we all are being faced with. Think about renegotiating. Think about those tactics. And keep the added value of AI in wherever we can think about it to help us. So a few of my own takeaways. I really hope that you've had your own. And again, I look forward to the wonderful recorded session that I am going to watch all over again. For our in-person guests, we extend our invitation to you to please join us on the second floor of this beautiful venue at the Howard Thurman Center and get a chance to connect with each other, connect with our guests, connect with our keynote speakers, and yourselves if you've been here. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.